Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating text that connects something like beauty standards to an entire philosophy of the world. It's a viewpoint that argues what we look like on the outside isn't just skin deep, but actually a reflection of a much, much deeper cosmic order.
So how do we get into this? Well, let's start with a story about a woman named Yang Hui. You see, her personal style, just the way she carried herself, ended up starting this quiet revolution in her community. It led people to remember a totally different ideal of beauty. Her story is really our doorway into this whole way of thinking.
So, first up, let's talk about Yang Hui herself. Because according to the source material, she basically became a living, breathing example of all the principles we're about to get into.
Now, what's really interesting here is that this wasn't some planned thing. She wasn't an ancient influencer trying to start a trend. It just happened. The other women in her community saw her, and they were drawn to this calm, dignified, graceful way she had about her. So they started copying everything, not just her clothes or her makeup, but her etiquette, her manners, the whole package. She just became the standard.
Okay, so that's the story. But what's behind the story? This is where we get to the core philosophy, because Yang Hui's style wasn't just her personal taste. It was an expression of a really deep worldview, one that's rooted in some ancient principles.
So at the very heart of this is the idea of yin and yang. Now, you've probably heard of it, but this text connects it directly to beauty. Yang is the masculine energy. It's expressed in things like strong, angular features, which are seen as signs of vitality. And then you have yin, the feminine energy, which is all about soft, smooth lines that represent a kind of gentle tranquility. But the key is, they aren't enemies. They're seen as two sides of the same coin, totally necessary and complementary.
And this is probably the most important idea in the whole text, this quote right here. The idea is that your outer appearance is a direct, honest reflection of what's going on inside, your character, your thoughts, your spirit. So outer beauty isn't something you can just slap on. It's something that, in this view, radiates out from you when you're internally in balance with the way things are supposed to be.
And check out how deep this goes, all packed into a single word. The text uses the word "I" to describe a beautiful feminine face, but it doesn't just mean gentle or kind. The root meaning is lush, flourishing, like a healthy forest. It literally connects the ideal female face, one that looks kind and tolerant, to the element of earth, which is at its most beautiful when it's fertile and abundant. A person's face, in this worldview, can actually hold the essence of the planet.
All right, so this brings us to a really direct comparison that the source lays out. It contrasts that traditional ideal of fullness and abundance with what it calls modern trends.
So, in this traditional philosophy, having a fuller face or body wasn't about being wealthy or overfed, no? It was a physical sign of inner qualities. Fullness was thought to show a generous and gentle spirit. Harmony and symmetry in your features, that pointed to an ordered mind and a life in balance. Even something like having a straight nose was seen as a sign of having an upright character. And then, the source flips the coin and presents a really stark contrast with what it calls the modern trend. It describes this pursuit of thinness, of sharp, angular features, the fierce look. And in that yin-yang framework, those are all masculine yang qualities. The text argues that this trend is intentionally blurring that natural distinction, creating a look that it says is neither male nor female.
And get this, the text even puts forward a biological argument to support this whole viewpoint. It claims that a woman's body already has its own natural monthly cycle for cell renewal. So if you add intense muscle-building exercise on top of that, you're essentially doubling the speed of cell replacement. And, the source argues, that can actually speed up the aging process.
You want to see just how important balance is in this system? Take a look at this ancient principle of Damdin. It basically divides the face into three sections, from top to bottom. A truly beautiful, ideal face has these three parts in almost perfect proportion. If they're out of whack, say a huge forehead and a tiny chin, it's seen as being top-heavy, a literal physical sign of an imbalanced life or character.
Okay, so let's start connecting the dots. The source makes it really clear that these physical ideals aren't just about looking good. They are deeply, fundamentally tied to a specific way of understanding social roles and what it even means to be a virtuous person.
So, to explain the social structure, the source uses this concept of the Dao Churang, which basically means arena. It suggests that, traditionally, men and women operated in different main arenas. For men,
The arena was society at large, so they were guided by social laws. For women, the arena was the home and family, so they were guided by domestic rules. This wasn't framed as being unequal, but as a functional, practical division of labor.
This brings us to a really famous and frankly often misunderstood saying. The text argues that we've been looking at this all wrong. It claims that its original meaning wasn't meant to be oppressive at all. In fact, it says the phrase actually comes from a place of deep compassion.
So here's the logic the text presents. It says a woman, by her very nature, already has 3 massive, demanding jobs: bearing children, raising them, and educating them. So the source asks, if you're already carrying that incredible load, wouldn't piling on even more talents and responsibilities just make your life unbearably difficult? From that point of view, being without talent wasn't a bad thing. It was seen as a blessing, a kind of good luck that spared you from a life of pure exhaustion.
The source also tries to correct the record on another really controversial topic, foot binding. It argues that the brutal, deforming practice that we all think of was not some ancient, time-honored tradition. It claims that in earlier dynasties, it was more about shaping the foot to be straight, not breaking bones. The extreme cruelty, it says, only became a big thing much later, during the late Tang Dynasty, a time it describes as a period of cultural decay and corruption.
Okay, so all of this brings us to the source's powerful final section. It's basically a call to action, to look at the problems in the modern world through this lens of yin and yang, and to seriously consider if we need to return to what it sees as a more natural, harmonious order.
And the text issues a very, very stark warning. It argues that when the masculine, yang energy in a society is strong and upright, men are protective and society is stable. But when that energy gets weak, or twisted, or inverted, men become petty and scheming. Society falls into chaos. And, the source claims, women are the ones who are preyed upon and suffer the most.
From this perspective, the consequences aren't just social, they're spiritual. This isn't just about fashion. The text puts forward the idea that different peoples were created by different divine beings, each with their own unique look. So to surgically change your natural features to look like someone else is, in this view, a very serious act. It's seen as cutting yourself off from your own divine origin, a spiritual disconnection with huge consequences. So in the end, the source leaves us with this one final, really provocative question. It paints a picture of a world where the fundamental balance of yin and yang has been turned upside down, leading to social chaos. And it asks us to wonder, is the only way to move forward to actually look back? Is restoring that ancient understanding of roles, virtue, and beauty the only path to saving our future? It's a challenging thought, for sure, and one that leaves you with a lot to chew on.